Hello and welcome to Noobs Explained. In this episode, we're abbots in a monastery trying to amass the greatest library of sacred books the world has ever seen. Join us as we collect resources and favors from the church in our efforts to build our great libraries. In this fantastic little game designed by Steve Finn and published by Aiello, we're playing Biblios. To set up the game, place the resource value board on the middle of the table. Place a corresponding colored die on each space with the value 3. Then, remove cards from the deck according to the number of players. For example, in a game of 4 players, we'll remove 7 cards. Make sure you put them aside face down so that no one knows what they are. You then shuffle the remaining cards, place them on the table within easy reach of all players. Finally, determine which player will go first. Feel free to fight about it.
The Biblios deck contains several types of cards. Resource cards are one of 5 colors. Brown monk cards, blue pigment cards, green holy book cards, orange manuscript cards, and red forbidden tome cards. The brown and blue cards range in value from 2 to 4. The orange, red, and green cards range in value from 1 to 2. There are several special cards in the deck called church cards. These cards allow you to manipulate the values of the scoring dice. Some allow you to move the value up, some allow you to move the value down, and some allow you to make a choice. If the card shows 1 die in the corner, you may affect the value of any one of the resource dice. If the card has 2 dice in the corner, then you may affect the value of 2 different dice. If you acquire one of these cards, either in the donation phase or the auction phase, you must play and discard it immediately. However, you are not required to actually use the power on the card. Often it is best to put these cards in the auction pool so that you'll know better which values you want to manipulate when you acquire them. The deck also contains gold cards. These cards range in value from 1 to 3. These are the cards you will be using to bid on the cards that come up in the auction phase, so having lots of gold is a good thing. And putting value 3 gold cards in the common pool is not usually something you want to see happen when you're the active player.
Biblios consists of 2 game phases, donation and auction. In the donation phase, the active player assigns cards. The number of cards assigned is the number of players plus 1. So in our 4-player example, the active player will assign 5 cards. The player draws cards one at a time and decides where to assign them. The player will assign 1 card to their hand, 1 card to the auction pool, and the rest of the cards to the common pool, from which other players will each select a card. Once a card has been assigned, it cannot be moved or replaced. For instance, if you choose to take the first card into your hand, the remaining cards must be assigned either to the auction pool or the common pool, even if that card is better than the one you chose to keep. To assign a card to the auction pool, place it face down in the auction pile. Only you will know that this card will show up in the auction phase. To assign a card to the common pool, place the card face up in the middle of the table. In our 4-player example, there will be a total of 3 cards in the common pool at the end of your turn. Once you've assigned all the cards, the player to your left chooses a card from the common pool. Then the player to their left, and so on until each player has selected a card. Then the active player passes to the left and they repeat the donation process. This continues until the draw pile has no more cards left. Once that happens, the auction phase begins.
When the auction phase begins, the auction pile is shuffled and the cards are auctioned off one at a time. The first active player in the donation phase is the first active player in this phase as well. The active player flips over the first card and has the option of bidding first. If the card is not a gold card, they may start the bidding at any amount of gold, or they may pass. Then the next player may up the bid by at least 1 gold or pass. This continues until all players but 1 have passed. The player who bid the highest amount wins that card. When this happens, that player must display and discard the gold that they bid. If the only combination of gold cards is more than the amount they bid, then they must pay the extra gold. There is no change. For instance, if I bid 5 gold for a card and win, but I only have 2 3-value gold cards in my hand, I must pay 6 gold. If everyone passes on a card without bidding, then no one receives the card, and the auction control passes to the next player. Players are allowed to bid more gold than they have in their hand to try and up the other player's bids. However, if they end up winning the card and do not have enough gold to pay their bid, then they are shamed and penalized because liar, liar, pants on fire. In this case, each other player randomly draws a card from the shamed abbot's hand. Then the bidding process for the current card begins again, but the shamed abbot is not allowed to bid. There is a less harsh penalty variant, which is good to use if you're playing with younger players. With this version, the shamed abbot must allow the player to their left to select a random card from their hand to be discarded. Once again, the bidding process starts over with the shamed abbot not allowed to bid. If a gold card is put up for auction, then players do not bid an amount of gold. Instead, they bid a number of cards that they will discard from their hand. Each player ups the bid at least one card or passes. When a player wins the card, that player discards face down the number of cards that match their bid and take the auction card into their hand.
When the last card is auctioned, then final scoring begins. For each color, players reveal the total value of all that color's cards in their hand. The player with the highest value takes that die and puts it in front of them. The value of that die is the number of points the player won for that color, and this continues until all colors have been awarded. If 2 or more players tie for the value of a particular color, then the player with the card closest to the letter A wins. Once all points have been awarded, then the player with the highest point total wins. If there's a tie, then the player with the most gold in their hand wins the tie for that particular color. If there's still a tie, then the player who won the brown monk category wins. Thanks for joining us to learn how to play Biblios. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for even more gaming goodies. And until next time, game on.
So you'll know better values. Just listen.
This is how I talk.
I don't want to clap.
Just clap. Real loud. Poop.
Say what?
Even.
Okay.
I need to do that whole thing again. Oh yeah, well I'm done.
Ba, ba, ba.